Hello everyone, welcome to the 173rd episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'd like to talk about the illusory quest for absolute truth. And I'll just share a small story for that. So imagine it's two different babies, and one of the babies has the following experience. It thinks to itself, I'm going to crawl out of my room because my room is the end of the world. It's like there's nothing outside my room. And I'm going to climb, I'm going to crawl to the door and see what's, on the other side, because that's where absolute truth is. That's where infinity is. And like its edge of reality is its room, its boundary. And so it does that. It crawls and then it opens the door and realizes, wow, there's the whole house here. And then it says, well, I'm going to just crawl on all fours now and see what's outside my house, because my house is like my illusion, and then the outside world is the truth, and I'm going to go and pursue that. And so it does that. It manages to kind of slip in and take a peek outside the door of its house, and then it sees, wait a minute, but there's still something out there. There's still the world. I thought it was infinity. I thought it was absolute truth. I thought it was the end. And then it learns how to walk, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna actually walk to the end of my street, because the end of my street is like the end of my reality, the end of illusion, and on the other side there's infinity, there's absolute truth. And so it does that. It's sort of, when parents are not watching, it goes to the edge of the street, and there's another street. Wow. Then it becomes a child, learns how to ride a bike, and it does the same for the edge of the city, because it thinks the city is the end, or the Maya, the illusion, the end of the boundary. Then it becomes like a teenager, and it thinks, well, the world is flat, and I'm going to go to the edge of the world, and then, oh crap, and then becomes an adult, and it's like, oh, I'm on a sphere, I'm on a planet. Well, I'm going to go and explore my solar system, and that's like, once I explore that, then and so it's pushing the boundaries of what it thinks is reality, what it thinks is absolute truth, constantly, by marrying experience of an illusory truth, an illusory limit, which is just in its mind's kind of eye, but it develops its faculties of moving through or occupying a certain space, which represents the truth that you can handle, gradually as it develops physically. And then the other baby says, I'm just going to sit in my crib and do nothing until I reach absolute truth and knowledge. And until I acquire absolute truth and knowledge, I'm not going to budge. And then after 60 or 70 years or so, it suddenly, it receives an illumination, and suddenly it has absolute truth. But it can't get there. It can't get there because its body is completely atrophied. And it never handled to, go through these different experiences of enlarging its capacity to handle larger and larger truths through experience. And so it's stuck. It knows, but it can't go where it knows, because, it didn't associate the experience with the knowledge or the knowing. And that's a traditional issue with awakening to larger and larger truths. Even for me, for instance, it's knowing things, but your body can't handle what you're knowing. It's like knowing that you have to go to the top of a mountain, but you never were doing hiking or rock climbing before. It's going to be a painful experience, because you need to embody the truth, and that's a tough exercise. So I hope you found this little story interesting. It's just this idea of one of the morals is you shouldn't be afraid of sharing half-truths or things that are not absolutely 100% correct, because that's not the point. The point is to explore that limiting truth until you open the door, metaphorically, to a larger reality or truth, and then you revise and then you move forward. But in the meantime, you've learned to sort of train your brain, your body, and everything to sort of be comfortable in that half truth that you were exploring at some point, right? And that's like this traditional kind of. I've had this thing because in empiricism and in science, especially in science, there's such a fear of not being right, of not being correct, of not being accurate, of not being precise, of not being, of being wrong and peddling half truths or fake news or whatever. This obsession with truth and never being wrong by applying this very rigid methodology and everything. And it's good for certain things, but for these kinds of free explorations of reality, asking ontological questions, it's very, very limiting. And it is this kind of thing where you're like a baby that refuses to budge until it has absolutely found the absolute truth, and until then it's just going to stay put. And that's just not organic. It's just not the way that things are, even the way that we developed as organisms, because our truths, from what we believed when we were children to what we believe now as young adults or adults, has shifted massively through our development, and that's perfectly natural. And your body grows in order to be able to roam the reality that you're in, just as your mind grows in order to grasp larger and larger truths. And if you can't settle on anything else but the absolute truth from the get-go, from the start, then your mind can't handle or occupy that space. It's just not prepared. And so, I call this the spiritual brainstorm, and I've talked about this before because it is a brainstorm. It's a brainstorm where I'm training my mind to expand, and maybe it's expanding into something that is not the absolute truth, but that's okay, because it's just getting, how should I say, trained to occupy a larger and larger mind space of a truth that is expanding as well, in order to be able to handle larger and larger truths, so to speak. As I do these processes. So yeah, don't the key takeaway is, don't be afraid to be quote unquote wrong. What you should be afraid of is not exploring the boundaries of your wrongness, so to speak. So it's like this baby that thinks that its room is the ultimate reality. There's nothing outside its room, and doesn't bother checking the four corners and going around, in its room and peeking out the door. That's a bit problematic as well, obviously. If you stay too comfortable in whatever you think is the truth and don't bother to push it to its limits and put it to the test. I've also given this example of nested Plato's cave, to exemplify the same kind of idea, where you can view reality as just Plato's cave nested one inside the other, and the outside reality is just a cave that is so big that you can't see that it's a cave, but it's again another cave, and there is another exit to an even broader reality, and so on and so on. And that's just one of the ways that that you can build an experience from this all-knowingness, kind of pure consciousness, whatever, where you expand your reality in stages, rather than just like opening your eyes and instantly becoming infinite, omnipotent, everything. Now you have to create a narrative or an experience to grow and expand in order to embrace your entirety, and you do this by creating these kind of these levels, or these nested kind of illusions, one inside the other, that you deconstruct progressively with hopefully a very enjoyable and blissful experience. Because again, a baby takes pleasure in crawling around its room. A baby takes pleasure as well to explore its house, and a child takes pleasure in exploring the boundaries of its neighborhood, and so on and so on. And it should be a very joyful process, and not a process of frustration of like, oh, I can only cycle this far, and oh, this is terribly limiting, and blah blah blah. No, it's just you have to be in adequacy between your comfort, your ability for exploring larger truths, and your actual actions of doing so. So it's like, imagine like a child that has learned to ride the bike, and it still explores reality by crawling on all fours. It's not. It's going to be painful. By the same token, it's going to be painful to put a baby on a bicycle and just push him and saying, "Here, explore the neighborhood." Bam, that's going to be very painful as well. So again, it's very organic. It's very with this wisdom is kind of very intuitive if you think about it. And it's just a complete revamp of your relationship to absolute truth and all of these kind of the quest for absolute truth and how you go about it. So I hope you found this interesting. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, the usual, and don't hesitate to leave a comment, and talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.